So Shamubeel, you said in there that you can't see any strong sources of growth for the New Zealand economy. Are there any on the horizon, or is this a good thing that we don't have this?
We're very much expecting a pretty flat economy. There will be some growth, some momentum, but I think it'll be pretty slow. And that's exactly what we need. We need a period of slow economic growth so that we can pay down debt, both at the household sector and also make adjustments for the government sector.
Right, and you say we're paying down debt. You also had a chart on there showing that we're saving more, but lending growth is falling away. What's happening to those extra deposits then? They're not being lent out?
There's a lot of precautionary savings. So everybody's kind of being cautious, not just you and me as households, but also banks. They're not spending a lot of money in lending to new customers. So what we're seeing is that deposit growth is very strong, but lending is growing at just 1% a year. And what we're seeing is a whole bunch of cash that's just sitting around that will be deployed once the economy picks up.
Okay, and with all this leveraging and saving going on, I guess there's not much on the inflation front, and people aren't really spending money, are they?
No, look, we're not really seeing much inflation. There are some cost increases coming through, things like insurance, rates, these are going up, but the general price of goods and services is pretty subdued. And, a lot of the businesses we're talking to are telling us that it's very hard to raise prices, and they're still seeing a lot of margin squeeze. So we expect to see inflation being very contained over the next couple of years.
But contributing to inflation pressures, you said, are the staples, petrol, rates. They're still there.
Yeah, we still have pockets of inflation, right? And the kind of inflation we have are very much those unavoidable things. And what we tend to see with cost increases in, unavoidables, necessities, is it acts as a tax on everything else. So discretionary spending gets squeezed out by the increase in cost of, say, petrol. So what we're going to see, I think, over the next couple of years is still some pretty high rates of growth in some of these necessity costs that reduces our ability to spend more on the fun things in life.
But if we were able to spend more on those things, it would be a better base for the economy, surely. It would help businesses. Would be able to spend on things that businesses make instead of spending money on rates.
Yeah, we would have a bit of breadth in the economy, but at the same time, for example, with rates, the money is recycled back into the local community, typically through investments and other bits and pieces. So, money is still going around, it's just different directions.
Now, in terms of New Zealand's export sector, it's not looking too bright for anything outside the rural sector, really. How long is this going to last?
Yeah, look, the dairy sector is still going gangbusters, but outside of dairy, things are weak, and what we're seeing is that a high New Zealand dollar and weak global demand is really weighing on our exporters. We think that, generally speaking, the global weakness is probably about, sort of 3 years into a 7-year cycle, so we still have a bit of weakness to come. We are going to see exporters doing it tough, but we've seen a lot of closures over the last 3 years, and the ones who are left now are pretty good guys and pretty, good exporters. So we're a little bit optimistic.
And this is your 7 years of pain idea.
Yeah, the 7 years of famine is very biblical, but look, I think when you look through the history, it has been the case that when you get deleveraging processes, it takes around 7 years to come out of it.
Now, you mentioned that we would be looking for investment in the economy in a few years, and you mentioned it was going to come from offshore. Isn't that exactly what we don't want?
Yeah, look, because national savings still isn't rising, until and unless we get national savings improving, any increases in investment has to be funded by borrowing money from overseas. It's a little bit unavoidable for us until we get the policy settings right for national savings, and I'm not convinced that we have that yet.
Okay, and those policy settings are set by the government. What do you see there? You don't think they can really get that target in 2015 for the surplus, do you?
I think it'll be very tough to get to 2015 because the economy is not going to give them a helping hand on tax revenues, and also I think cutting back expenses is pretty difficult, as we've seen that as they're trying to cut back expenses, it can be a little bit slow. So we're thinking that it'll be fairly hard to get back to surplus by 2015 unless they have more policies to announce in the May budget.
And you want to see cuts around interest-free student loans?
I do, and this won't make me popular, but things like interest-free student loans, working for families, Kiwi service subsidies, these are very wasteful subsidies that are not good for the economy.
I guess on the KiwiSaver side, though, you want people saving more. I guess if you force them into it, though, you won't have to have the subsidies.
Yeah, but what we have seen is, that's exactly right. With the KiwiSaver subsidies, we haven't actually seen net increase in national savings, which is what we want to see, not just a transfer from government to the household sector. And what we want to see is a tighter focus on KiwiSaver, and I think compulsion would be a good idea if you wanted to go down that path. But what it does with compulsion as well is it changes from saving by yourself to saving within KiwiSaver.
Now, just quickly in terms of the housing market, what do you see happening? It's in Auckland, Canterbury versus the rest of the country. So what do you see happening with house prices in Auckland? There's a bit of pressure on them.
There is, and I think there are some real hotspots of demand within Auckland. So some of the desirable postcodes have been doing really well. So if you're in Mount Eden, house prices are doing really well. But on average through Auckland, we can't see a lot of pricing pressure. And that's because it's not affordable. House prices are still very expensive relative to incomes, relative to rents. So, we're not convinced that it'll be possible for a house price to rise much in Auckland despite the demand pressures.
There are lots of people coming from Canterbury. Are you saying you think people are going to be holding off buying houses because of the prices?
Well, some people just can't afford it, right? I mean, not everyone can afford a $500,000 mortgage. So I think we are going to see some pressures on the rental market. And as rents start to rise, we'll start to see some supply coming back in. And that will come through new builds in particular.
Right, so do you see new builds picking up? So they're pretty low.
They're still pretty low, but we're getting more optimistic on Auckland relative to other regions. So I think Auckland and Canterbury will see quite a bit of work taking place over the next 2, 3, 5 years, whereas the rest of the country, we think the rate of recovery will be much shallower.
Okay, and quickly, OCR pick?
Still middle of 2013. I still haven't changed my view. I think the world still is pretty scary out there. Our economy is pretty flat, and there is no inflation.
Thank you.